Johnson fakes the draw, wants to throw. Pass over the middle, complete. To the 10, to the 5, touchdown LSU!
The legend and lore of LSU football defines the state of Louisiana as much as the Mississippi, New Orleans, or the sweet smell of Cajun cooking. The rockin' Saturday nights in the Bayou, Chinese bandits, the South End Zone, Halloween nights, they're all a part of LSU football. But more important are the coaches and athletes that created this tradition and gave it meaning. The men who dedicated their lives to LSU football. They are the Golden Tigers.
The throw sets up, puts it out there, and it's complete, and it is a touchdown!
Hi, I'm Ron Franklin. You know, for generations, the stars have come out in Tiger Stadium on Saturday nights. And as a result, Tiger fans have been treated to some of the best football in the history of the game. And you know, it really doesn't matter if you're talking about current day names like Tommy Hodson or Gary James or Dalton Hilliard, or if you want to go back and talk about some of the legends, Y.A. Tittle or Coach Paul Dietzel or maybe Billy Cannon. All were involved in great victories here, but most importantly, all set standards in character and courage that is simply unmatched. In 1893, Louisiana State University was home for approximately 200 students, none of whom had ever heard of football. But at the beginning of the fall semester, that would change forever. A young chemistry professor named Dr. Charles Coates had recently arrived from up north and was dismayed to learn LSU had no team. Intent on introducing the game to his new colleagues, he shanghaied 27 players from the student body. He nailed cleats onto leather shoes and created uniforms, and football was born on the Bayou. But it wasn't until the early 1900s that Tigers' first star emerged. He was Doc Fenton, an extremely versatile athlete who had been recruited from Pennsylvania to play for LSU. A testament to his ability came from LSU President Troy Middleton, who said, "I saw Jim Thorpe, but Doc Fenton was better." In 1907, Fenton and his teammates made a memorable trip to Cuba, embarrassing the University of Havana 56-0. Then in 1908, Doc led LSU to a perfect 10-0 season. He scored 25 touchdowns and kicked 6 field goals that remarkable year, including a 46-yarder that was LSU's longest until 1965. After Fenton and his teammates moved on, LSU fans had little to cheer about for nearly 2 decades. Finally, in 1923, LSU talked Auburn coaching legend Mike Donahue into coming to Baton Rouge to put the LSU Tigers back on the map. He would lead the Tigers to a winning record the very next season. More importantly, on Thanksgiving Day, 1924, LSU fans witnessed the dedication of Tiger Stadium. A record 18,000 fans crammed the brand new facility that day. And although the Tigers lost 13-0 to Tulane, the day marked the start of big-time college football at LSU. While Mike Donahue never matched his previous success at Auburn, he did build a solid foundation for success at LSU. In the 1930s, Tiger fans reaped the rewards. Recruits like Baby Jack Torrance arrived in 1931. At 6'4", 200. instantly became one of the new conference's elite teams. At the same explosive backfields in LSU history. Fothery was noted for his speed and cutting ability, which allowed him to make some of the longest touchdown runs in school history, while future Hall of Famer Abe Michael was especially adept at throwing the long bomb. In his 41-0 victory over Tulane, it clinched the 1935 SEC title. But it was a teammate of Michael's from Homer, Louisiana, named Gaynell Tinsley, that would make the most lasting contribution to LSU football. Gus, as he was known, was a devastating blocker and sure-handed receiver. He became a two-time All-American who today is still considered to be one of the finest athletes in LSU history. In the brand new AP Top 20 poll. The 30 saw one more All-American emerge at LSU. He was end Ken Kavanaugh, one of the most devastating ends in the history of LSU football. His catch against Santa Clara in the 1938 Sugar Bowl was a highlight of the first LSU bowl game ever to be captured on motion picture film. The man who had perhaps the greatest impact on LSU and football in those days was not a player or a coach. He was the Tigers' #1 fan, Louisiana Governor Huey Long. Once, he arranged for free train fare for the student body to travel to an away game. After Abe Michael had led the Tigers to the 1935 SEC title, Long had him made a state senator. The Tiger Band into one of the nation's finest. He even helped write the LSU fight song. The Kingfish, as he was known, was a bigger-than-life figure whose exploits may seem a little outrageous today, but he loved LSU football with a passion that can still be felt today on the campus at LSU. Governor Huey Long was LSU's biggest fan, without question. He loved his Tiger football team, and he wanted to see them dominate the college football world. He tried to help recruit. He praised them. He even sent in plays from the sideline. And when an assassin's bullet took his life here at the state capitol in Baton Rouge, one source was quoted as saying, "It is a wonder he didn't bleed purple and gold." In the 1940s, LSU the legendary Alvin Dark scored a touchdown the very first time he touched the ball for LSU, and that was in took him far from the moving van. Steve Van Buren began his LSU career as a blocking back. But by his senior year, he was all SEC and wound up his career as the MVP of the Tigers' 1944 Orange Bowl victory over Texas. Another future NFL Hall of Famer came to the LSU campus in 1946, almost directly from the University of Texas athletic dorm. Somehow, LSU assistant Red Swanson convinced the 17-year-old Y.A. Tittle that he'd be better off on the banks of the Mississippi.
Y.A. Tittle had agreed to come to LSU and wanted to come to LSU. And just before I was supposed to pick him up at his home in Marshall, Texas, well, Texas had taken him down to the University of Texas. And I went down that night and went over to the dormitory and got a hold of him and got him out of town that night because we were afraid that the Texas Rangers would get after us if we didn't get on out of the state before daylight.
Yelverton Abraham Tittle played quarterback like no one before him, practically rewriting the LSU passing record book. He took special delight in beating Tulane, which had never offered him a scholarship, and where his older brother Jack had played football. He never lost to the Green Wave. In 4 games against the Greenies, he completed 42 of 56 passes for The 1950s brought about a new era in college football. In 1954, Tiger Stadium was expanded. It took on the bowl look for the first time and seated an astounding number of 67,500 fans. LSU was on the verge of the golden era of Tiger football. Rebuild the program. He quickly assembled one of the most talented coaching staffs in the South, which included future LSU athletic director Carl Maddox and future head coach Charlie McClendon. The Tigers started 0-6 in 1956, but turned things around when an inexperienced fullback named Jim Taylor was inserted into the lineup. LSU won 3 out of the last 4 games behind the power running of Taylor. In 1957, he enjoyed his finest year as a Tiger, leading the conference in rushing and touchdowns.
Being on scholarship here at LSU certainly meant a lot to me and gave me the opportunity to get a college degree and to work on my skills as a professional and to try and become a professional football player. So I was certainly delighted to be given the opportunity here at LSU to go on and further my football skills at the professional level.
Taylor did just that, becoming an NFL Hall of Fame fullback for the legendary Green Bay Packers. With the departure of Taylor, one of the most loved athletes in LSU history, Billy Cannon, took center stage. He was the SEC's Player of the Year in 1958, leading the Tigers to their only national championship. An especially gifted athlete, he was also the SEC sprint and shot put champion. On the gridiron, in addition to his offensive skills, he was a tenacious tackler and a heck of a kicker. At one point in his career, LSU won 19 straight games, by far the most successful era in school history. Billy loved LSU, and LSU loved Billy. He added a whole new dimension to the Saturday night hysteria called Tiger football. It seemed as if each week, Cannon would pull off a daring run even more breathtaking than his last. The 1959 showdown against Ole Miss. Cannon etched his name into the LSU history books with a feat of mythical proportions. With the Tigers trailing the Rebels 3-0 in the fourth quarter, Cannon pulled off the most famous Halloween stunt in the history of college football.
Ole Miss, he stands on his own 28. He gets a pass from center, he boots it and gets another nice kick away going way downfield. Billy Cannon watches it bounce. He takes it on his own 11. He comes back upfield to the 15, stumbles momentarily. He's at the 20, running hard at the 20. for a touchdown. Listen to the cheer for Billy Cannon as he comes off the field. Great All-American.
I said, but got a few breaks, got some great blocks. Emil Fournette took 3 right off my back, and it was up to just the punter and I. And I'm sure he thought I was going to cut back to the open field, and I cut to the sidelines. And Jake Gibbs never made a tackle in his whole career at Ole Miss. He was their quarterback and punter, and so I went by him, and then it was a touch and go as to whether the game was going to finish or I was going to score. So.
Tiger fans already knew that Billy Cannon was the finest football player in America. At the season's end, it was made official. Billy won the Heisman Trophy and brought it home to Baton Rouge. The 1958 championship team was loaded with talent. Halfback Johnny Robinson would have been a superstar on any other team. He alone scored 4 touchdowns in LSU's 62-0 trouncing of Tulane that year. An all-SEC quarterback, Warren Rabb had the ability to maximize the talents of Cannon and Robinson while contributing himself both in the air and on the ground. And kicker Tommy Davis may have been the unsung hero of 1958. His kicks against Florida and Mississippi State kept the Tigers' unbeaten streak alive. And center linebacker Max Fugler was the backbone of a defense that allowed just 82 points in 21 games during the 58 and 59 seasons. It was that defense that ensured a national championship in 1958. When Cannon and Robinson moved on, Coach Dietzel announced that a sophomore from West Monroe, Louisiana named Jerry Stovall would be their equal. He indeed became the player Dietzel predicted. In 1960, Stovall began a relationship with LSU fans that would last for 3 decades. In his final 2 seasons, Stovall led the Tigers to a 19-2-1 record, including an Orange Bowl rout of Colorado and a Cotton Bowl shutout of Darrell Royal's undefeated Texas Longhorns. By the time his career ended, he was a unanimous All-American, runner-up for the Heisman Trophy, and SEC Player of the Year in 1962. You could honestly say that no one ever credit should have gone actually to the men up front in the trenches. You see, over the years, LSU has been blessed with some truly outstanding offensive linemen. And 2 of the best the SEC has ever known set up shop right here in Baton Rouge in the early 1960s. Charles Bo Strange was a 3-time All-SEC performer and an All-American in 1960. Following him was Roy Mooney Winston, number 60, a Baton Rouge native and another consensus All-American. He went on to play in 4 Super Bowls with the Minnesota Vikings. Perhaps the finest lineman in the SEC at that time was All-American tackle Fred Miller. He was a crushing force on both sides of the ball. But his teammates remember him most for the night he crawled out of a hospital bed and led the Tigers to victory.
Fred was in the infirmary in back traction, and we were getting ready to play Texas A&M on a Saturday night. He wasn't supposed to play. Got up and checked himself out and came and played. And on the first play defensively, broke through, made a tackle behind the line of scrimmage, and I think that kind of set the tone for everything that was going to happen. And then, of course, his brilliant career in professionals kind of put a crown on everything else. But he was an incredible leader for us.
Although these legends are remembered primarily as an offensive player or a defensive player, all played both ways, sometimes in the most miserable conditions. As the 60s arrived, the times were changing. Soon these days of playing 60 minutes would be gone forever. But the deeds of these brave warriors would live on in the hearts of LSU fans forever. In the mid-1930s, LSU began what would be one of the most successful eras in its history. Again, Huey Long was center stage. The Kingfish was personally involved in the selection of the new football coach. And it was only after his approval that Bernie Moore, already a member of the LSU staff, was appointed head coach. It turned out to be one of the best decisions in LSU history. The Tigers won back-to-back SEC titles in 1935 and 36. Moore went on to win 83 games in 13 seasons, becoming the second winningest coach in LSU history. Under Bernie Moore, LSU became one of the most dominant teams in the conference, but he left to become the SEC's first full-time commissioner. His successor, former LSU All-American Gaynell Tinsley, led the 1949 team that became known as the Cinderella Tigers. It was a team destined to whip 3 conference champions and earn a spot in the 1950 Sugar Bowl.
They did have a good bit of talent, but they had more pride and great respect for being able to play for LSU, and I think their effort that they gave had more to do with than anything else.
He also developed a unique numbering system for players using both letters and numerals. It was experimented with for 1 season, but never caught on. In 1955, a young assistant coach from Army named Paul Dietzel was hired to take the Tigers back to the top of the SEC. In 3 years, the Tigers were not only SEC champs, they were an undefeated national champion as well. Dietzel was a promoter, cheerleader, and college football innovator all rolled into one. Before the 1958 season, he changed the offense to the wing T, suiting the talents of quarterback Warren Rabb and backs Johnny Robinson and Billy Cannon perfectly. Due to the depth of the talent he had on offense, Dietzel divided the players into the white team and the gold team. Due to a newspaper account's misprint, however, the gold team quickly became known as the Go Team. It was the defense, however, that Dietzel gave perhaps the most enduring nickname. He called it the Chinese Bandits, after seeing a Terry and the Pirates comic strip referred to a Chinese bandit as the most ferocious creature on earth. In 1958, the Bandits more than lived up to their nickname. They held opponents to 7 points or less in 10 of the 11 games that season. 1958 was truly a very special year.
It was a Cinderella year. It was a great year. Everything just gelled. And, you know, we were winning games, but nobody was really on our bandwagon. And we went down and played the University of Miami, which all the Eastern sports writers came down for that game, and we beat them handily. And from then on, everything was on our wagon, and the wagon just kept rolling and rolling, and it was a great year.
In 1959, the Tigers were bowl-bound again, but it was the '61 SEC championship team that Dietzel called his finest. After an opening day loss to Rice, This squad won 10 straight, including a 25-7 triumph over Colorado in the Orange Bowl. Then came the almost unthinkable news. At the height of his career, Paul Dietzel announced he was leaving LSU to coach at his beloved West Point. LSU fans were shocked and hurt. Into this tension-packed situation stepped Charlie McClendon. A former Dietzel assistant, McClendon wasn't a salesman like his predecessor. Charlie Mack was a straightforward defensive coach, a trait he learned from his mentor, Bear Bryant. What you saw with Charlie Mack, well, that's what you got. And what you got was 2 decades of winning football. In his first season, despite the pressure of replacing the beloved Dietzel, the Tigers went 9-1-1 and shut out Texas 13-0 in the Cotton Bowl. He had perhaps his finest season in 1969. The Tigers went 9-1 behind a great defense led by linebacker George Bevan and the arrival of a pair of sophomores named Tommy Casanova and Andy Hamilton. Ironically, LSU stayed home at New Year's after being shut out of the major bowls. The following season, the Tigers had their revenge. LSU was the champion of the SEC, and Charlie Mack was named college football's Coach of the Year. During his tenure, McClendon produced 17 All-Americans. The Tigers won nearly 70% of their games. '80 was a time to begin anew. A young man by the name of Bo Ryan was hired as the head coach. He had great credentials, and it appeared as though LSU would maintain consistency in a league that had become the most competitive in the country. But tragically, in January, Bo Ryan died in a plane crash. The new era simply never began. Bo Ryan never coached a football game at LSU. Jerry Stovall, LSU's former All-American running back, had the unenviable task of taking over as head coach. At this time, more than any other, it was perhaps more important that the program was in the hands of a member of the In 1982, he was named National Coach of the Year after guiding the Tigers to a berth in the Orange Bowl. In 1984, Bill Arnsparger was appointed head coach. His experience led the Tigers to 3 straight winning seasons and an SEC championship in 1986. Arnsparger's defensive assistant, Mike Archer, followed in his footsteps and produced an SEC title of his own as head coach in 1988. In 1990, Curly Hallman became the 28th head coach of LSU football. Before coming to Baton Rouge, Hallman had directed Southern Mississippi to 2 bowl games in 3 years. He now leads LSU into its 2nd century. These men have created a tradition of excellence that has made LSU one of the winningest football programs in NCAA history. More importantly, they have produced young men who are winners both on and off the field. During the 1960s, college football truly came of age. National television exposure thrust the game into the media spotlight. With LSU's consistency of success, the Tigers were becoming famous far beyond the bayou. LSU receiver Doug Morrow grabbed the attention of the nation by earning All-American honors in 1965. On January the 1st, his receiving and kicking led the Bengals to a stunning 13-10 victory in the Sugar Bowl over Floyd Little's highly touted Syracuse team. While offense grabbed the headlines, it was defense that would become the trademark of Coach Charlie McClendon's Tiger teams of the 60s and the early 70s. McClendon's first defensive All-American was John Garlington, a fast, tough defensive end who had a nose for the football. In 1969 and 1970, LSU fielded the most tenacious defense in the country. Both years, the Tigers led the nation in rushing defense. Two homegrown stars, linebackers Mike Anderson and George Bevan, provided the heart and soul of the unit. Bevan overcame a severe knee injury in his junior year to become an All-American in 1969. His legendary blocked extra point against Auburn that season preserved a hard-fought 21-20 victory over the other Tigers. Mike Anderson was simply the most feared linebacker in America in 1969 and 1970. And despite battling a series of knee injuries, Anderson consistently made the big play. In 1970, his fourth down hit on Auburn's Wallace Clark climaxed a dramatic goal line stand and enabled the Tigers to win a 17-9 heartstopper, a victory that served as the catalyst for the Bengals' SEC title run.
You visualize on your players some of the big plays that they made for you. And Mike Anderson stood about as tall as any young man that ever put the uniform on down in Auburn. When he stopped Clark, I believe his name was, the fullback down there, stopped him on the 1-yard line, right in the breast button and put him back. That was the difference in the ball game.
Up front on the defensive line, the Tigers were just as ferocious. In 1971, they were led by tackle Ron Este. He simply had a nose for the quarterback. His speed and quickness earned him All-America as well as Lineman of the Year honors from ABC Sports. But perhaps the most famous defender of that era was a defensive back from Crowley, Louisiana, named Tommy Casanova. He began his career on offense, but he made his mark in the defensive secondary. In 1971, he brought tears to Irish eyes with an interception in the end zone in the Tigers' 28-8 thrashing of Notre Dame. This three-time All-American and member of the all-time SEC team also returned punts for the Tigers and ran back 2 for touchdowns in LSU's 1970 victory over Ole Miss. Although LSU defenses were leading the nation in the early 70s, a young quarterback with an arm like a rifle quickly grabbed the headlines. He was Burt Jones, the son of an NFL star named Dub Jones. Known as the Ruston Rifle, Jones became LSU's first and only All-American quarterback. He was a player that broke the mold for the college quarterback. Jones could throw a 70-yard bomb as easily as a 15-yard out. He also possessed the speed of a running back and the hard-nosed attitude of a middle linebacker. His favorite target during the '71 season was his first cousin, Andy Hamilton, an all-SEC performer who at that time was LSU's all-time leading receiver. Best of all, Burt Jones was a fearless competitor who seemed to play his best with the game on the line. He was fortunate to be surrounded by several other All-Americans. Tyler LaFosse was a tough defensive lineman, but earned All-American status when he moved to the other side of the ball. All-American linebacker Warren Capone, number 55, won team MVP honors in 1973. In 1971, Capone showed that he had some of the qualities that made his distant cousin Al so famous by swiping 2 Notre Dame passes to thwart Irish scoring drives. Mike Williams was another defensive star in the mid-70s. The whole country witnessed his stamina and courage in a game against Florida in 1972. Playing in a driving rainstorm, Williams caught Gator speedster Nat Moore from behind to save an apparent Florida touchdown. In 1976, Charlie McClendon unleashed a 1 in a million talent on the SEC named A.J. Dewey. One of the few 4-year starters in LSU history, Dewey had amazing speed and quickness for a defensive tackle. While Burt Jones redefined the quarterback position at LSU, it was Charles Alexander that created a new breed of running back in the Bayou. As a 2-time All-American in 1977 and 78, he broke 29 different LSU records, several of which have never been broken. And his 237 yards against Oregon in 1977 still ranks as the finest single-game performance by an LSU back. Like most great backs, he still gives most credit for his success to the men in the trenches, the Root Hogs.
You know, it all starts up front. The running back is only as good as the blockers in front of him. I know I got a lot of the credit, but those guys did all the work.
One of Alexander's backfield mates was a rough, tough competitor named Hokie Gaijan. As a member of the New Orleans Saints, he continued the Bengal tradition of running backs who had gained acclaim in the National Football League. In 1982, 2 freshman running backs arrived in Baton Rouge and immediately turned the town upside down.
That's Hilliard. He'll score. He'll score. Dalton Hilliard, the first play on offense, and LSU has a 6-0 lead. Risher, pitch. Gary James. Gary James. He's free at the 40. He's got 1 man to beat. 1 man to beat. Touchdown. Touchdown, Gary James.
They were Dalton Hilliard and Gary James, the Dalton James Gang for short. They instantly captured the imagination of Tiger fans while terrorizing opposing defenses.
After our freshman had come in, Darryl Moody, who was a running back coach, came to me and after about 3 days, and he said, I think we may have a problem. The guys that we have listed next to last and last on our depth chart may wind up to be the very best that we've got. And then our freshmen got ready and the varsity came in, and that came to be true. And they added a dimension to us we had not had before. And it was incredible that we were calling the same plays we'd called in the past, but they were working a little bit better. And just sheer God-given talent, tremendous character by the individuals, but I think they were basically the missing ingredients.
The running exploits of the Dalton James Gang would have been impossible without an All-American offensive tackle named Lance Smith to lead the way. Following the 6'2", 273-pound Smith, Hilliard and James accumulated more rushing and receiving yardage than any other duo in the history of the SEC. Gary James, with his 4.3 speed, complemented Dalton Hilliard perfectly. Hilliard ended his career as both the leading scorer and all-time leading rusher in LSU history. The running of the Dalton-James gang opened up an explosive aerial attack led by quarterback Alan Risher and All-American receiver Eric Martin. In 1982, the offense averaged 33 points per game. That's the most in LSU history. The 1982 defense did its fair share too. Led by All-American defensive back James Britt and safety Lifford Hobley, 9 members of the starting unit went on to play pro football. Britt was an enemy quarterback's biggest nightmare. One of Britt's big hits or interceptions short-circuited many scoring opportunities. The 1982 defensive MVP, Lifford Hobley, would go on to become all SEC in both 83 and 84. As a senior, his 80 tackles and 6 interceptions led the Tigers to a berth in the 1985 Orange Bowl. In 1986, Tiger fans witnessed the emergence of another offensive juggernaut. This lethal combination was composed of quarterback Tommy Hodson and wide receiver Wendell Davis. Together, they became the most productive passing combination in SEC history. What they did went far beyond statistics. Watching them at their best, one realized this was the work of 2 accomplished masters.
Drops back to throw, sets up, puts it out there, and it's complete, and it is a touchdown!
Freshman running back Harvey Williams took advantage of opposing defenses in his own explosive style. The team captain in 1986 was all SEC guard Eric Andelsack. His work up front was instrumental in the success of Hodson, Davis, and Williams. He would have gone on to become an All-Pro in the NFL, but was tragically killed in 1992 when he was struck by a truck in front of his Thibodaux home. The 1986 squad would win LSU's first SEC title under Coach Bill Arnsparger. You knew that with Arnsparger, the defense would be suffocating. Henry Thomas, Carl Wilson, and Michael Brooks led one of the SEC's most feared units. As the 80s came to a close, LSU would produce several more All-Americans. Defensive back Greg Jackson. Center Nacho Albragamo. And receiver Todd Kenshin. Kenshin was a threat as a receiver and a kick returner. And his thrilling touchdown run against Texas A&M in 1990 was still another moment that rocks Death Valley on Saturday night.
Trying to come outside, gets by one man, has the first down, still on his feet, coming down the near sideline. He may go 45-40. He's at the 35-30. He may go all the way. Going to the far side of the field. Kitchens at the 15-10. He's at the 5. He is in the
decades change, but the thrill remains the same. From the pioneers to these modern-day heroes, they've all shared in the dream to play for LSU. They played in Tiger Stadium, heard the wild cheers on Saturday nights in Baton Rouge, and earned a place in the hearts of Tiger fans forever. When you come to Tiger Stadium, you can almost feel the presence of the men whose deeds are responsible for the lore and the legend of LSU football. From Doc Fenton to Paul Dietzel, Burt Jones, Dalton Hilliard, and the hundreds of other young men who wore the purple and gold, there has been a common bond. Each one has played for the pride of LSU and for all the people of Louisiana. They are the Golden Tigers. They have created a tradition of excellence and a fighting spirit that is unique in college football.